The first time Tomas asked Vesha if he could kiss her, she thought he was making fun of her. They were alone in his forge after midnight. Rain tapped against the high windows, the last coals breathed red beneath the ash, and Vesha's repaired sword lay between them on the anvil. She had faced cavalry charges without stepping back. She had held a mountain pass with 6 warriors against 40 men. Yet when the human blacksmith touched 2 fingers to the scar beside her mouth and quietly asked, "May I kiss you?" Every answer she had ever learned deserted her. No one had asked before. Men had challenged her, obeyed her, feared her, and once tried to purchase her loyalty with a silver chest. A few had admired her from a safe distance. None had stood close enough to feel her breath and offered her the choice. Vesha searched Tomas's face for cruelty. There was none. Only soot along his cheek, worry in his brown eyes, and a patience that frightened her more than any blade. "You know what I am," she said. His thumb remained near her scar without touching it. "I know who you are." The difference struck harder than a hammer. Her hands, strong enough to bend a cheap horseshoe, tightened at her sides. Tomas waited. The forge waited with him. Even the rain seemed to soften against the roof. Vesha lowered her eyes to his mouth, then raised them again. "Ask me once more," she whispered. 3 weeks earlier, she had entered his forge carrying a sword no blacksmith wanted to touch. The weapon was nearly as old as the peace between humans and orcs was young. Its dark blade had been folded from mountain iron, its grip wrapped in worn red leather, and its pommel carried the carved jaw mark of Vesha's clan. A crack ran from the center of the blade almost to the spine. One hard strike would break it in 2. Vesha laid it across Tomas's counter just before sunset. "Repair it." Tomas looked at the sword, then at the tall orc woman standing on the other side of his workbench. She wore weather-darkened armor over a deep burgundy tunic. Her olive-green skin carried pale scars across one forearm and another beside the right corner of her mouth. 2 small ivory tusks curved past her lower lip. Heavy black hair fell in a thick braid over one shoulder, bound at the end with a plain iron ring. She was not the first soldier to enter his forge. She was simply the first who made the room appear smaller. "Good evening," he said. Her amber eyes narrowed. "The sword is cracked." "I noticed." "Then repair it." Tomas wiped his hands on his apron and leaned over the weapon. He was broad through the shoulders from years at the anvil, with dark hair that never stayed tied and a short beard singed slightly lighter near the chin. A burn scar crossed the back of his left hand. Vesha watched that hand approach her sword. Before he touched it, she caught his wrist. The movement was so fast that the tools on the wall seemed to tremble after it. Tomas looked down at her green fingers around his wrist. Then he looked at her. "Am I allowed to examine it?" Vesha released him at once, but her expression remained hard. "You are allowed to repair it." "Those are different things." For the first time, uncertainty passed through her eyes. Tomas did not reach for the sword again. "If you want my work, you'll have to let me understand the damage. That means I turn it over, I test the metal, I may remove the grip. If any of that is forbidden, tell me now." Human smiths ask too many questions. Bad smiths don't ask enough. Vesha studied him for a long moment. Outside, evening bells rang above the narrow roofs of Bellhaven. Soldiers were gathering in the square for the arrival of the orc peace delegation. Tomas had expected noise, drinking, and a profitable week of dented armor. He had not expected one of their warriors to arrive alone before the procession. At last, Vesha nodded. "Examine it." He lifted the sword carefully. It was heavier than a human longsword and balanced for someone with greater reach. The crack was ugly but clean. Fire damage marked one edge. and beneath the soot he found a second line where the metal had begun to separate. "This didn't happen in battle," he said. Her jaw tightened. Tomas rotated the blade beneath the lamp. It was heated too quickly, then cooled in water. "Can you repair it?" "Maybe." Her hand landed flat on the workbench. "Maybe is not an answer. It's the only honest one you're getting tonight." Most men shrank when Vesha became angry. Tomas did not. He also did not puff out his chest or reach for the hammer at his belt. He simply met her stare with the weary calm of a man who had argued with iron all his life, and did not intend to be hurried by anything softer. "Why does it matter?" he asked. "It is mine." "That explains why you brought it. It doesn't explain why you need an uncertain repair instead of a new blade." Vesha glanced toward the open forge door. A group of human boys had stopped in the street to stare at her. When she turned her head, they scattered. She lowered her voice. "At the end of the peace gathering, I must place this sword on the council stone. Your marshal will place his beside it. If either weapon is unfit, the ceremony fails." "And if the ceremony fails?" "Men who have spent 10 years missing war will find a reason to begin it again." Tomas looked once more at the crack. "When do you need it?" "On the first morning after the full moon." "That's 12 days. 11 and a half. He almost smiled. She did not. If you enjoy original orc-bound fantasy romances and want to support the creation of future stories, you can join Tales from Orc on Patreon. The link is waiting in the description. Now, back to Vesha and the blacksmith holding the fragile peace between their peoples. "Who damaged it?" he asked. "Can you repair it?" "I can try." Vesha drew a small leather purse from her belt and dropped it on the counter. The weight of the coins made Tomas's eyebrows lift. "Half now," she said. "Half when it is whole." He pushed the purse back. "You pay when I know whether it can be saved." Her face changed then, not enough for anyone who did not know how to look. Suspicion gave way to surprise. She had expected greed, perhaps insult. Fairness seemed to unsettle her. "You refuse payment." "I refuse payment for work I haven't done." "That is not common." "Neither is bringing a ceremonial clan blade into my shop half destroyed and refusing to say how it happened." She picked up the purse. "I will return tomorrow." "You don't need to. It is my sword. And now it's in my forge." Vesha stepped closer. The counter remained between them, but Tomas felt the heat of her as clearly as the banked fire behind him. "Nothing happens to it without my knowledge." He should have told her to find another smith. Instead, he heard himself say, "Come after sunrise. If you arrive before I've had tea, I'll charge extra." Her gaze dropped briefly to his mouth, as if uncertain whether he had made a joke. "Orcs do not drink tea," she said. "Then bring something better." She left without another word. The following morning, Tomas opened his shutters to find Vesha sitting on the stone step outside his forge with 2 steaming cups in her hands. "You said after sunrise," she said. The sun had barely cleared the eastern wall. "Technically," Tomas replied, "you're correct." She gave him one of the cups. The drink inside was black, bitter, and strong enough to remove old paint. He coughed after the first swallow. Vesha watched him with grave attention. "Is it better? Than tea?" "Yes. I'll tell you when I can feel my tongue again." Something moved at the corner of her mouth. Not quite a smile, but near enough to make him look twice. They began with a grip. Tomas explained each step before he took it, partly because the weapon deserved care, and partly because Vesha stood close enough behind him to see over his shoulder. When he reached for the binding, he paused. I need to cut this. No. Then I can't remove the grip. The leather belonged to my mother. The answer came so quickly that it carried none of her usual armor. Tomas set the knife down. All right. Vesha blinked. All right. I'll loosen it with steam. It will take longer, but I can preserve most of it. You do not need to. You just told me it matters. I told you not to cut it. Same thing if a person is listening. For several seconds, she said nothing. Then she moved to the other side of the workbench, no longer looming behind him. My mother carried the sword before me, she said. She wrapped the grip after my first training cut, split the old leather. How old were you? 7. Tomas glanced at the size of the weapon. You trained with this at 7? I dragged it more than I swung it. This time he did smile. After a moment, Vesha did too. The expression transformed her. Her tusks no longer appeared severe. They framed the small curve of her lips. The scar beside her mouth pulled slightly when she smiled, giving it a crookedness Tomas found unexpectedly lovely. She noticed him looking, and the smile vanished. What? She asked. Nothing. Humans say nothing when they mean something. Orcs apparently do the same. Vesha folded her arms. You are bold while standing near several hammers. They're my hammers. That will not help you if I use one. Please put it back in the correct place afterward. The near smile returned, more cautious this time. By midday, Tomas had removed the grip without cutting the leather. Beneath it, he discovered the old tang bore fresh scratches. Someone had loosened the pins before the blade was heated. He showed Vesha. This sword wasn't damaged by carelessness, he said. Someone wanted it to fail. She stared at the marks. Did you know? I suspected. That would have been useful last night. I did not know whether I could trust you. And now? Her amber eyes lifted to his. Now I know you preserved the leather when cutting it would have been easier. It was not a declaration of trust, but it was the closest thing she had offered. Tomas placed the sword pieces on a clean cloth. If the person who did this learns, I can repair it. They may try again. They will not enter this forge. You can't stand here for 11 days. I have stood in worse places for longer. That wasn't an invitation. Good. I did not require one. She took a position beside the door. By sunset, she was still there. For the next 3 days, Vesha guarded the forge from a chair she insisted she did not need. She arrived at sunrise with the same bitter drink and left after Tomas covered the sword for the night. At first, she spoke only when he asked a direct question. Then, gradually, the silences between them became less guarded. Tomas learned that she hated sweet food, loved thunder, and could identify every mountain bird by its call. Vesha learned that he hummed when concentrating, kept nails between his lips despite repeatedly cutting himself, and talked to difficult pieces of metal as if insulting them might improve their behavior. It cannot hear you, she said on the second afternoon. Then why did it behave after I threatened it? Coincidence. That's what iron wants you to think. She shook her head, but he saw amusement in her eyes. The repair demanded patience. Tomas could not simply weld the crack and polish away the evidence. The original steel had been folded with a mineral found only in the Orc Mountains. Human iron would hold, but a mismatched seam might split during the ceremony. He needed to blend a narrow strip of compatible metal through the damaged section. Vesha removed a small knife from her boot and placed it on the bench. Use this. Tomas examined the dark blade. This is good steel. It came from the same mountain. It will be destroyed. The sword matters more. He looked at the knife's worn handle. And who gave you this? Her silence answered. Your mother? Vesha nodded once. Tomas pushed the knife back. No. You said you needed matching steel? I'll find another source. In Belhaven? There are old weapons in the marshal's armory. The marshal will ask why. Then I'll lie badly and hope he gets bored. Take the knife. No. You are stubborn. That's why my work lasts. Vesha leaned both palms on the bench. The ceremony is larger than an object. And peace built by destroying every piece of your past isn't much of a peace. Her head lifted sharply. Tomas continued before caution could stop him. Your mother's sword, her leather, her knife. How much are you expected to feed into this ceremony before humans believe you came honestly? As much as necessary. That sounds like a soldier's answer. I am a soldier. You're also the woman sitting in my forge every day pretending she doesn't laugh at my jokes. Vesha became very still. The room seemed to change around them. Tomas felt the mistake as soon as the words left him. Not because they were untrue, but because he had spoken past the distance she kept so carefully. She straightened. Find your steel, Blacksmith. Vesha, do not use my name as though you know me. She walked out into the rain. Tomas told himself to let her go. Instead, he followed her without his coat. He found her behind the forge beneath the narrow awning where he stored charcoal. Rain struck the yard in silver lines. Vesha stood with her back to him, hands braced against the wet stone wall. I'm sorry, he said. For what? For deciding closeness was mine to name before you did. She turned slowly. Rain had darkened the loose hair around her face. Her expression was not angry now. It was exposed, and that was somehow worse. Among my people, she said, a warrior is known by what she can endure, not by what she wants. That sounds lonely. Loneliness is survivable. So is bad ale. That doesn't make it desirable. Her eyes narrowed, but his poor attempt at humor had softened something. Tomas stepped beneath the awning. He stayed several feet away. I shouldn't have spoken as if I knew all of you. No one knows all of another person. Then I'd settle for knowing a little more, if you permit it. The word permit made her glance at him. You ask permission often, she said. I work with fire, expensive steel, and people carrying swords. It's a useful habit. Vesha looked toward the yard. Most humans either avoid me or touch without asking. They pull my braid to see if it is real. They reach for my tusks when they are drunk. They ask whether my skin feels different while already testing it. Tomas felt anger rise in him, clean and immediate. Who? Why? So I know which customers suddenly need to pay double. She gave a quiet sound that might have been a laugh. There are too many. Then I'll become wealthy. Vesha finally looked at him fully. Rainwater ran from the edge of the roof between them. You may know a little more, she said. Thank you. But do not become pleased with yourself. Too late. She stepped past him toward the forge. Her shoulder brushed his chest, perhaps by accident. Perhaps not. That evening, Tomas found what he needed in the marshal's armory. A broken orc spearhead made from the same blue-black mountain steel. An exhausted clerk accepted one of Tomas's poor explanations and made him sign the ledger. When Tomas returned, Vesha was asleep beside the forge, one hand on her knife. He took his wool coat from its peg and stopped before laying it across her. Her eyes opened at once. May I? He asked. The knife settled back. After a moment, she nodded. Tomas draped the coat over her shoulders. She watched his careful hands as if the space between skin and skin carried its own heat. You found the steel? Then begin. Tomorrow. My hands shake when I'm tired. Vesha rose, his coat barely meeting across her armor. Sleep. I will remain here. Guarding the sword? Guarding the hands that repair it. The words stayed with him long after he climbed the stairs. Before dawn, Tomas woke to someone splitting wood. From the upstairs window he found Vesha below, still wearing his coat, with enough divided logs beside her to last a month. Is this how orc guests say thank you? He called. I am not a guest, and your coat is poorly made. I made it myself. You are a blacksmith. That explains it. Her laugh rose clearly in the cold yard, low, warm, and entirely unguarded. Tomas forgot his next answer. After breakfast, Tomas heated the damaged blade slowly and shaped a narrow piece of spearhead to fit its wound. Vesha worked the bellows, quickly learning the rhythm of his breathing. Hours passed in heat and sparks. Vesha held the tongs while Tomas drove new steel into the open seam. He guided her hands once, touching only the wrapped handles. Higher, he said. Keep the weight toward me. She adjusted. Good. The single word made her glance at him. By afternoon, the blade cooled in ash. The new seam was ugly, but it held. When Tomas reached for a cloth, Vesha was already offering one. You missed, she said. Missed what? She gestured to her own cheek. Tomas wiped his face. Better? Worse. He tried again. Vesha watched for several seconds, then held out her hand. Give it to me. He passed her the cloth. She stepped close enough that the warmth of the forge was no longer the only heat between them. May I? She asked. Tomas went still. The question was his own habit returned to him, and he understood at once what it had cost her to say it. Yes. Vesha wiped a streak of soot from his left cheek with slow care. Her knuckles brushed his beard. Her amber eyes remained fixed on the cloth, but Tomas could see the quick movement of her breath. She cleaned another mark near his temple, then one beside his mouth that may not have existed. Neither of them moved away. You are still dirty, she murmured. Occupational hazard. Perhaps you are a poor blacksmith. You've stayed 5 days. For the sword. Of course. Her gaze rose to his. The cloth remained against his cheek. A crash sounded in the street. Vesha turned instantly, one arm sweeping Tomas behind her, while her other hand found her knife. A vegetable cart had lost a wheel outside. Turnips rolled through the gutter as the merchant shouted. Tomas looked at the broad green shoulder now shielding him. You know, he said, I survive noises most days without assistance. Vesha lowered the knife. You were distracted. By what? She thrust the cloth into his hand and walked back to the bellows. That night, Tomas served stew. Vesha protested that she had efficient campaign rations, which he said smelled like boiled boots. She ate 2 bowls. When he threatened to add honey, unless she admitted she was hungry, she called it an act of war and took half his bread. After supper, Vesha found his fiddle and ordered him to play. The first notes scraped badly, but by the second verse, his hands remembered. Her boot began marking the rhythm. You dance, he said. Orc war forms contain measured footwork. Then show me the war form that fits a human wedding song. She gave him a look that should have ended the matter. He played again. For half a minute, she remained motionless. Then she moved. It was not a human dance. Her steps were grounded and powerful, a slow turn followed by a crossing stride, her hands opening and closing as if releasing invisible weapons. Yet there was grace in it. The burgundy fabric beneath her armor shifted around her legs. Her braid swung across her back. Tomas missed 3 notes because he was watching. Your music has failed, she said. The musician has. Why? He could have made a joke. Instead, he told the truth. You're beautiful. Vesha stopped. The word hung in the forge. Tomas set down the fiddle. I'm sorry if that was unwelcome. She looked almost angry, but the anger had nowhere to land. Beautiful is not a word used for me. Then people around you are blind. They use strong, fearsome, useful. You are all of those. Beautiful means soft. Only to fools. She searched his face. You find this beautiful? Her fingers touched the scar beside her mouth. Yes. And these? She indicated her tusks. Tomas nodded. My skin? Yes. Her voice lowered. My size? Especially your size. A flush deepened the green at her throat. She turned away, but not before he saw it. Play again, she ordered. He obeyed. She did not dance this time, though her boot resumed its quiet rhythm. On the 6th day, someone tried to steal the sword. Tomas woke before dawn when the warding bell beneath his stairs gave one faint chime. It was a simple blacksmith's trick, wire tied to the lower window and threaded through hanging scrap. Nothing magical, but effective. He reached the forge floor carrying a hammer. The rear window stood open. A dark figure was bent over the workbench. Vesha dropped from the loft railing before Tomas could shout. She struck the intruder shoulder first and drove him into the wall. A knife flashed. Vesha caught his wrist, twisted, and sent the blade skittering across the floor. The man wore human guard boots and a gray scarf over his face. Tomas moved to block the open window. The intruder kicked Vesha's injured knee. She faltered. He tore free and charged toward Tomas. Tomas swung the hammer, not at the man, but at the chain beside the window. An iron shutter dropped with a crash. The intruder struck it, rebounded, and Vesha caught him from behind. He threw a fistful of powder into the coals. White light exploded across the forge. Tomas heard Vesha curse, a body strike wood, then the rear door slam. By the time his sight returned, the intruder was gone. Vesha stood beside the workbench, blinking through tears caused by the powder. Blood ran from a cut below her ribs. Sit, Tomas said. The sword. It remained beneath its cloth. Safe. Sit down. The attacker is gone, and you're bleeding on my floor. Then your floor will survive. Her knees weakened. Tomas caught her around the waist before she fell. Vesha's weight drove him back against the bench, but he held on. For one startled moment, her body was pressed fully against his. She was solid, hot, and breathing too quickly. I have you, he said. Her hand gripped his shoulder. Do not say that unless you mean it. I mean, you're not hitting the floor. Oh. What did you think I meant? Nothing. Even wounded, she could make that word sound armored. Tomas helped her to the chair. The cut had sliced through leather near her side. It was not deep, but the cloth beneath was soaked. I need to see it. Vesha's hand covered the wound. It will close. It needs cleaning. I can do it. Then do it. She tried to stand and nearly folded. Tomas crouched before her. Vesha, listen. I will not touch you without asking. But that blade was dirty, and I need to know how deep it went. May I remove the damaged leather? She looked at the closed shutters, the scattered powder anywhere but at him. Yes. He unfastened the lower straps of her armor and set the cut panel aside. Beneath it, her burgundy tunic was torn along the ribs. The cloth, too, he said, only enough to reach the wound. Her throat moved as she swallowed. Yes. Tomas cut the fabric carefully. Vesha's skin was warmer than a human's, dark olive in the low firelight. Old scars crossed her side. A narrow line below the ribs, a round mark near her hip, another disappearing beneath the tunic. He kept his gaze on the fresh wound. This will sting. Do it. He cleaned it with spirits. Her fingers closed around the edge of the chair until the wood creaked. You may hold my shoulder, Tomas said. I do not need. The cloth touched the deepest part of the cut. Her hand seized his shoulder. Careful, he murmured. I only own one of those. Her grip loosened at once. I was joking. Your jokes are badly timed. They're all I have besides hammers. He stitched the wound with 4 small passes. Each time, he warned her before the needle entered. Each time, she nodded. When it was finished, he wrapped a clean bandage around her waist. To pass the linen behind her, he had to lean close, one arm circling her body without quite becoming an embrace. Vesha's breath touched his ear. Tomas. It was the first time she'd spoken his name. He paused. Do you want me to stop? No. The answer was almost inaudible. He tied the bandage and withdrew slowly. His hands remained at her waist for 1 heartbeat longer than necessary. Her green fingers still rested on his shoulder. They looked at each other. The urge to kiss her arrived so suddenly that Tomas felt it like a physical pull. Her lips were parted, her small tusks pale against them, her eyes no longer guarded. He could have leaned forward. She might have allowed it. But allowed was not the same as wanted. He stood and fetched her water. Something in Vesha's expression shifted. Relief, disappointment, perhaps both. You should rest upstairs, he said. And you? I'll stay with the sword. The attacker may return. Then I'll criticize his technique until he leaves. Tomas. He liked the sound of his name in her voice far too much. I'll wake you if I hear anything. She considered arguing, then accepted his hand and rose. At the stairs she stopped. You could have kissed me, she said without turning. Tomas's heart struck once, hard. I could have. Why did you not? You were hurt, frightened, depending on me. I was not frightened. Of course not. She turned then. That is not an answer. Because I want your yes when you're free to say no. Vesha stared at him from the bottom step. Humans do not ask for every kiss, she said. This human will. She climbed the stairs slowly, one hand against the bandage. Tomas sat awake until dawn, wondering whether he had done the honorable thing or the most foolish thing of his life. Upstairs, Vesha did not sleep either. Morning found Tomas at the workbench with the intruder's knife before him. It was an ordinary military blade, the kind issued to Belhaven's watch. The edge carried a faint violet stain from the powder used in the coals. More interesting was the mark beneath the guard, a tiny stamped tower with one broken window. Vesha came down the stairs wearing his spare shirt beneath her loosened armor. The linen pulled across her shoulders and stopped well above her wrists. Tomas looked up, forgot the knife, and then made himself look at the knife again. You are staring, she said. It's a very fine shirt. It barely fits. That is what makes it remarkable. Vesha's tusks appeared as her mouth curved. The expression faded when she saw the blade. Watch issue, she said, with an armory stamp. Tomas pointed to the broken tower. These marks identify storage rooms. This came from the Eastern Barracks. Then the attack was ordered by a human officer. Or someone stole it. You defend them quickly. I'm defending the difference between knowing and guessing. Vesha crossed the room and leaned over the table. The movement brought her shoulder against his. Neither of them moved it away. Your council will bury this, she said. Then we don't take it to the council yet. What do you suggest? The powder came from somewhere. The knife came from somewhere. and whoever entered knew which window wasn't visible from the street. We trace what we can before announcing what we know. She glanced sideways. You speak like a scout. Blacksmiths spend our lives learning what happened by examining what broke. And if the trail leads to your marshal? Tomas met her gaze. Then I'll help you expose him. Even if it shames your city. Peace that depends on hiding the truth is only war waiting for better weather. Vesha went silent. What? He asked. You speak differently than other humans. Better. More. I'll accept that. She reached toward his face, then stopped with her fingers inches from his cheek. May I? Yes. Vesha brushed a metal filing from his beard. Her thumb lingered below his lower lip. You missed one, she said. I may keep missing them. Then I may keep removing them. The words were simple. The promise inside them was not. At the eastern barracks, an anxious clerk recognized the knife's stamp. 4 matching blades and a supply of violet flash powder had been issued to the deputy marshal's private office. He showed them the ledger only after Tomas promised to report his cooperation rather than his silence. Outside, Vesha said, We have enough to accuse him. Not enough to prevent him claiming everything was stolen. Then the ceremony should be canceled. That's what he wants. Both sides blame each other. Soldiers return to the passes, and whoever profits from fear gets paid. My sword may still fail. Tomas clasped her offered forearm. Then we finish it before we expose him. They returned to the forge by side streets. Halfway there, snow began falling in broad, quiet flakes. Children raced through the square, catching them on their tongues. A baker hung evergreen above his door. Belhaven looked peaceful enough to make the conspiracy seem impossible. Vesha stopped beside a fountain, frozen into a tower of pale blue. Your city is beautiful, she said. You sound surprised. I first saw it from the northern ridge with an army behind me. Tomas remembered that winter. He had been 19, forging spearheads until his hands bled while rumors claimed the orcs would burn every house south of the river. I was here, he said. Vesha turned. In the battle? In the forge. My father marched. I stayed because someone had to shoe the horses and repair what came back. Did he return? No. The snow gathered between them. Vesha's face became unreadable. My company held the northern ridge. Tomas had guessed. The scar at her mouth was old enough. So was the silence that sometimes entered her eyes when bells rang. Did you kill him? He asked. I do not know. It was the honest answer, and it hurt more than an easy denial. Vesha stepped away from the fountain. You should not repair my sword. Why? Because I may have taken your father. And he may have killed your mother. Her eyes flashed. She died on that ridge. Now he understood the sword, the leather, the knife, and the weight she carried into his forge. For a moment, the old war stood between them, wearing the faces of people they loved. Part of Tomas tried to reach for the old hatred. But Vesha was not a distant army now. She was the woman who had guarded his sleeping hands and asked permission before wiping soot from his cheek. She had been 17. Tomas had been 19. Old enough to be used, he said. Not old enough to understand what using us would cost. You think repairing that sword repays her, he said. It doesn't. You think keeping every scar open proves you remember. It doesn't. We were both left things by that war. I got a forge. You got a blade. Maybe we decide what they make next. Vesha looked away. A tear stood bright against her lower lashes, so unexpected that Tomas pretended not to see it. I did not kill prisoners, she said. On the ridge, I opened a path for the wounded after nightfall, human and orc. My father's buckle was found south of the battlefield. She turned back. He may have taken your path, Tomas said. Or another man took the buckle. Yes. They had no certainty. Sometimes possibility was the first mercy grief permitted. Tomas lifted his hand and stopped before touching her cheek. May I? Vesha nodded. He wiped the tear with his thumb. She closed her eyes. The busy square seemed to disappear. Her hand closed around his wrist, not to remove it, but to hold it there. When her eyes opened, their faces were close. Tomas wanted to ask then. He saw the question reach her before he spoke. Fear entered her gaze, not fear of him, but of the answer she might give. A patrol rounded the corner. Vesha released his wrist and stepped back. The sword, she said. The sword, he agreed. They worked through the afternoon and into the night. The seam accepted the mountain steel. Tomas hammered until the three metals became one, folded through each other so completely that only a narrow silver wave marked the repair. Vesha kept the heat steady. When his arms tired, she fed him water without being asked. When her wound pulled, he ordered her to sit, and she ignored him until he threatened to stop working. Near midnight, the blade was ready for its first test. Tomas clamped it gently and struck the flat with a wooden mallet. The sound rang pure. Vesha exhaled. Again, she said. He struck harder. The seam held. Again. If you command me once more in my own forge, I'll charge you for the pleasure. Again, Tomas. He struck with the iron hammer. The note filled the rafters, bright and unwavering. Vesha smiled. This time she did not hide it when she caught him looking. It is not finished, he said. It needs tempering, grinding, and a new pin. But it will live. Yes. She crossed the space between them and wrapped both arms around him. Tomas stood frozen inside the embrace. Vesha was taller by half a head, strong enough to lift him if she chose, and careful as if he were the fragile one. Her cheek rested against his hair. His hands hovered near her back. May I hold you? He asked into her shoulder. Her arms tightened. You are slow, Blacksmith. He placed his hands against her back. Vesha made a small sound and softened into him. Armor, wool, and linen separated them, yet the closeness felt more intimate than nakedness. Tomas could feel her heartbeat under his palm. She could surely feel his. No one holds warriors after victory? He asked. They strike our shoulders and pour drink over our heads. That sounds wasteful. This is better. They remained together until the coals settled and the cold began pressing at the windows. On the 8th day, the deputy marshal arrived with 6 guards and demanded custody of the unfinished sword. Vesha named the knife and powder traced to his office. His smooth smile barely moved. Many things are stolen during peace gatherings, he said. Give me the blade. No, Tomas replied. The deputy threatened his guild mark, his forge, and his reputation. He announced that the repaired sword would be tested publicly. If it failed, Vesha's delegation would leave in disgrace. If it holds, Vesha said, I will ask why you were so certain it would break. For the first time, his smile slipped. He departed, promising that Belhaven would learn which side Tomas had chosen. You should have given it to him, Vesha said when they were alone. He can destroy your life. He attacked the woman under my roof. It became my fight. Her expression softened at the words. You owe me nothing. I know. I'm doing this because I care what happens to you. Vesha reminded him that she would leave after the ceremony and that her home was 12 days north. I know, Tomas said. his voice roughening. She rested her hand on the covered sword. Then finish it. The next 2 days passed beneath a shadow. Rumors spread through Belhaven that an orc had attacked a guard, that Tomas had been bribed, that the ceremonial sword was cursed, and that the delegation planned to seize the council hall. Customers stopped coming. Someone painted traitor across his shutters in white lime. Vesha found Tomas scrubbing it before sunrise. "Leave it," she said. "Why?" "So you remember what standing beside me costs." He threw the brush into the bucket. "Do you think I didn't know people could be cruel until this week?" "Not to you." "Is that supposed to make it acceptable?" "It makes it unnecessary." Tomas descended the ladder. "You don't get to decide which part of me is necessary. I am trying to protect you." "By leaving me alone with the consequences?" Vesha recoiled as if he had struck her. He regretted it, but the truth remained. "You keep offering me the safest distance," he said more quietly. "Every time I step close, you remind me you're leaving. Every time you want something, you call it duty. You're so practiced at surviving loss that you prepare it before anything can stay. You know nothing about what I want. Then tell me." "I cannot. Cannot or will not." Her amber eyes burned. "Among my people, I command 60 warriors. My choices become their example. If I choose a human—" She stopped. Tomas barely breathed. "If you choose a human, they will question my loyalty. And humans already question mine. Then you understand." "I understand fear. I don't understand surrendering to it before we've even decided what this is." Vesha looked toward the street. "What do you believe it is?" He approached slowly. "Something I want to continue after the sword is finished." Her gaze returned to his. "And what do you want?" he asked. The answer seemed to move through her entire body before reaching her mouth. "I want to hear you play badly again." Tomas smiled despite himself. "I want your stew without honey. I want to wake beneath your coat and know why it is there. I want to enter this forge without needing a broken weapon as my reason." She stepped closer. "And I want you to look at me as you did when I danced." "I haven't stopped." Vesha's hand rose to his chest. "That is the problem." "It doesn't sound like one." She could have kissed him then. Instead, she pressed her forehead to his. "Not yet," she whispered. Tomas closed his eyes. "All right." They stood beneath the word traitor until the morning bells rang. That afternoon, Vesha attended the formal council feast. Tomas had not been invited, but the sword could not leave his care until the final tempering was complete. Vesha returned after dark, wearing ceremonial clothing instead of armor. Tomas opened the door and forgot to greet her. Her deep burgundy gown was cut simply, fitted at the waist and leaving her powerful shoulders bare beneath a fur-lined cloak. Thin, bronze rings decorated her heavy braid. The scar beside her mouth remained uncovered. She wore no sword. "Say something," she said. "I'm considering several things." "Choose one." "You're beautiful." Her shoulders lowered slightly, as if she had been waiting all evening to hear it from him. "The feast was unpleasant," she said. "Did the food have honey?" "Worse. Diplomats." Tomas let her in. She placed a folded document on the workbench. The deputy introduced a new condition. Before the ceremony, the sword will be struck against the marshal's blade 3 times. That isn't tradition. No, it is a test designed to break the repair. Tomas read the order. The council seals were genuine. "Can it survive?" she asked. "A clean strike, yes. 3 full strikes against a heavier blade. Tell me truth." I don't know. Vesha nodded as if receiving a battlefield report. Then we cancel. No. You just said... I said I don't know. Give me tonight. You have worked for 10 days. Then one more won't kill me. It may. Would you guard the hands that repair it? Her sternness broke. Yes. Then bring me the bitter drink. They worked side by side through the longest night of Tomas's life. He reheated only the repaired section, drew the temper back, and added a narrow reinforcing collar beneath the guard where the first shock would travel. Vesha polished the blade by hand. Neither mentioned the ceremony, the council, or mourning. Near midnight, rain began striking the forge windows. The blade lay finished on the anvil. It was beautiful, not because the damage had vanished, but because it had not. The silver repair line moved through the dark steel like lightning held inside a night sky. Tomas had replaced the pins and restored her mother's leather around the grip. Near the base, he had added a mark so small only Vesha would see it, a mountain peak joined to a blacksmith's flame. She traced it with one finger. You placed yourself on my clan blade? I can remove it. No. Her hand closed around the grip. It belongs there. Tomas looked up. Vesha set the sword down between them. Rain tapped against the high windows. The last coals breathed red beneath the ash. This was the moment from which the story had begun. Vesha stood on the other side of the anvil in her burgundy gown, her cloak folded over a chair. The hard lines of command were absent from her face. Tomas came around the workbench slowly. There is something I want, he said. She held his gaze. Ask. He raised his hand but stopped before the scar beside her mouth. May I touch you? Where? Here. She nodded. His fingertips followed the pale line beside her lips. Vesha's eyes fluttered but did not close. He touched the curve of one small tusk with his thumb, careful and curious. Does that hurt? He asked. No. Do you dislike it? No. Then why are you holding your breath? Because no one has done it gently. The answer nearly undid him. Tomas let his hand settle against her cheek. May I kiss you? Vesha stared at him, as if the question belonged to a language she understood, but had never heard spoken aloud. You know what I am, she said. I know who you are. Her hands tightened at her sides. She looked at his mouth, then into his eyes. Ask me once more, she whispered. Tomas stepped close enough that their breath mingled. Vesha, may I kiss you? She did not answer immediately. Her fingers rose to the front of his shirt, curling into the fabric as they had in none of his dreams and all of them. Her other hand touched his jaw with astonishing care. Yes, she said. Tomas kissed her. He began gently, giving her room to change her mind. Vesha remained still for the first heartbeat, overwhelmed not by the kiss, but by the freedom inside it. Then she leaned into him. Her lips were warm and softer than he had imagined. The small tusks changed the angle, so he followed her rather than assuming. Vesha made a quiet sound against his mouth and pulled him closer by his shirt. Tomas's hand moved from her cheek to the back of her neck, pausing until she nodded. The second kiss was no longer cautious. Vesha had never been kissed, but she learned with the fearless attention she gave every difficult thing. She tilted her head, tested the pressure of his mouth, then smiled when Tomas lost his breath. Her strong arms circled his waist. His palms settled against her bare shoulders, warm green skin beneath calloused hands. When they finally separated, their foreheads remained together. Was that acceptable? Tomas asked. Vesha's eyes opened. You are asking for criticism now? Professional habit. Your technique requires further testing. He laughed, and she kissed him again before the sound was finished. Later, they sat on the floor against the anvil with a blanket around both shoulders. Vesha rested her head against Tomas's chest. His fingers moved carefully through the end of her braid. "May I remove the rings?" he asked. "Why?" "They're pressing into my arm. A warrior would endure it. I'm a delicate craftsman." She lifted her head. "You may." He removed each bronze ring and placed it beside the sword. When the last one came free, Vesha loosened part of the braid. Heavy black hair spread across his arm. "Among my people," she said, "only family and lovers touch unbound hair." Tomas's hand stopped. "Do you want me to?" Vesha took his fingers and placed them back into her hair. Yes. He understood the gift. He did not cheapen it with a joke. "No one ever kissed you?" he asked after a while. "No. No one you wanted." Wanting was not enough. The warriors near me feared I would mistake tenderness for disrespect. Others believed strength meant I required none. "And did you?" I told myself I did not. "Why?" She traced the burn scar on his hand. "Because it is easier to live without something if you believe it was never meant for you." Tomas kissed her temple. "It was meant for you. You speak with great certainty. I've tested the theory 3 times. 4. We should verify again." Vesha turned in his arms. They did. Before dawn, a stone shattered the window and a bottle of oil burst against the wall. Vesha smothered the burning rag while Tomas covered the spreading oil with sand. 2 hooded men fled through the alley. Vesha chased one down despite her wound and threw him against a water trough. He was one of the deputy marshal's guards. The oil bottle carried the same broken tower seal as the stolen knife. With neighbors watching and a patrol approaching, the captured man began to bargain. By sunrise, the council knew everything. The deputy marshal had paid a servant to damage the sword, then ordered the break-in and fire. He expected failed negotiations to restore the military contracts controlled by his family. The council arrested him, but rumors had already reached both delegations. Orc warriors gathered near the north gate, while human soldiers filled the square. Each side expected betrayal. Canceling the ceremony would confirm every fear. Vesha stood in Tomas's forge as the first morning light touched the finished blade. "It still must be done," she said. The deputy's test was designed to break it. The council approved it publicly. If we remove it now, my warriors will believe humans fear the result. And if it breaks, then it breaks in my hands. Tomas fastened the final clasp on her armor. His fingers lingered against her shoulder. "May I ask you something?" he said. "You always do. Come back afterward." Vesha's expression softened. "To the forge?" "To me." She laid one green palm against his cheek. "Yes." That was suspiciously easy. "Do not make me reconsider." He kissed the inside of her wrist. "I'll see you after." Vesha carried the sword into the council square. Thousands gathered beneath the gray sky. Orc warriors formed 2 silent lines to the council stone, where the human marshal waited with a broad, ceremonial blade. Tomas followed with the Smith's Guild, though most members kept their distance. Vesha mounted the stone platform alone. The council speaker recited the terms: open roads, returned prisoners, and mixed courts instead of raids. Then came the test. The human marshal raised his blade. Vesha looked once toward Tomas. He nodded. Steel struck steel. The first blow rang across the square. The repaired sword held. The marshal struck again, harder. Sparks scattered over the council stone. Tomas's chest tightened. Vesha's arms absorbed the impact, her boots unmoving. The silver seam remained whole. On the third strike, the marshal brought his sword down with all his strength. The sound was enormous. For one terrible moment, no one moved. Then the human marshal's blade split near the guard. Half of it struck the council stone and spun to a stop. Vesha's sword remained in her hands, dark steel crossed by one bright line. Silence consumed the square. Vesha lowered the weapon. "A repaired piece," she said, her voice carrying to both armies, "is not weaker because it remembers where it broke." An orc warrior struck a fist against her breastplate. Another answered. The sound moved down their lines like thunder. Then a human smith raised his hammer. Others followed. Within seconds, the square filled with the ringing of fists on armor and tools against shields. The human marshal looked at his broken sword, then at Tomas. "I may need a blacksmith," he called. Tomas answered, "I charge extra for council work." Laughter broke the last of the tension. Vesha placed her sword on the council stone beside the broken human blade. The ceremony was completed not with two perfect weapons, but with one repaired and one ready to be. When she descended, diplomats and officers surrounded her. Tomas tried to wait. He lasted less than a minute. Vesha saw him pushing through the crowd. Her formal expression vanished. She met him halfway. "You came back," he said. "I said I would. May I?" Vesha caught the front of his coat and kissed him before the question was finished. The square reacted in several ways at once. Someone cheered. Someone gasped. One elderly counselor dropped his papers. The orc warriors watched their commander kiss a human blacksmith beneath the peace banners. And the human guild watched Tomas put both arms around a woman many of them had been too frightened to greet. When Vesha released him, Tomas looked dazed. "You didn't let me ask," he said. "I was asking. That method lacks clarity. Did you object? I may require another demonstration." She smiled against his mouth. Later, Vesha delayed the delegation until morning and spent the night in the forge. They did not promise forever. They promised something smaller and more honest. She invited him north in spring, and after summer they would decide the rest together. Vesha left Belhaven at sunrise, with the repaired sword across her back and Thomas's blue wool coat tied behind her saddle. He stood outside the forge until the delegation disappeared beyond the northern gate. The absence afterward was physical. Her chair remained beside the fire. One bronze braid ring lay forgotten beneath the anvil. Tomas picked it up and wore it on a leather cord around his neck. Winter passed in letters. Vesha's were brief at first. Tomas's were too long and contained one poor joke per page. Gradually, she wrote more. She told him that the sword remained whole, the pass was quiet, and a stone building near the river had been cleared for his forge. In the last letter before the thaw, she wrote only one line. "You asked permission to kiss me, and somehow I gave you permission to become home." Tomas read it 6 times. On the first clear morning of spring, Tomas left his Belhaven forge in an apprentice's hands and loaded his tools, old fiddle and anvil, onto a wagon. When the guildmaster said humans did not belong in orc settlements, Tomas tightened the final rope. Steel said something similar about mountain iron. They work well together now. He traveled north for 12 days. At the pass, snow still covered the high ridges, but green shoots pushed through the valley floor. A cluster of stone houses surrounded a timber hall. Smoke rose from a building near the river, where a newly painted sign showed a mountain joined to a flame. Vesha waited beside it. She wore no armor, only a dark red tunic fitted at the waist and heavy boots. Her black braid hung over one shoulder, decorated with the 3 bronze rings he had removed that night. Tomas's blue coat rested around her shoulders. He climbed down from the wagon. For a moment, they only looked at each other. Then Vesha crossed the road at a run. She lifted him completely off the ground in her embrace. "I missed you too," he managed. She set him down, but did not release him. Her amber eyes searched his face as though confirming that letters had become flesh again. "May I kiss you?" Tomas asked. Vesha smiled, scar curving beside her mouth. "You have crossed 12 days of mountain road. It would be cruel to refuse." "That is not a yes." She laughed, the same full, unguarded sound he had first heard from his upstairs window. "Yes, Tomas." He kissed her beneath the new forge sign, while orc warriors pretended not to watch from the training yard. The summer was not simple. Tomas ruined his first mountain charcoal. Vesha broke his largest hammer and blamed its construction. Some villagers distrusted him, while some human merchants refused to trade. Yet she always returned from patrol, and each return began with a choice spoken clearly. "May I hold you?" "Yes." "May I unbraid your hair?" "Yes." "May I stay?" "Yes." In autumn, the repaired sword was displayed above their hearth. Vesha no longer carried it every day. Peace had held through one spring and one summer. Patrols on both sides were reduced. Traders filled the mountain road with wool, grain, iron, and arguments over prices instead of territory. One evening, Tomas found Vesha standing beneath the sword with a narrow band of dark metal in her palm. "What is that?" he asked. "A request?" The band had been forged from the last fragment of her mother's knife and a shaving of steel from Tomas's first anvil. Orc designs were cut along one side. Human knotwork followed the other. They met without a visible seam. Vesha was nervous. Tomas had seen her injured, threatened, and surrounded. He had never seen her hands tremble. "Among my people," she said. "This is worn by someone invited to share a hearth for life." Tomas looked at the band. "You may say no," she added quickly. He looked up at her. "Did you practice that sentence?" "For 9 days. It was very good." "Tomas?" He took her trembling hand between both of his. "Ask me." Vesha drew a breath. "Will you share my hearth, my winters, and whatever remains after war?" Tomas made her wait only long enough to understand how often she had been made to believe tenderness was not meant for her. "Yes." She slid the band onto his finger. "Now," Tomas said, "may I kiss my terrifying future wife?" "You may." Their first kiss had begun with fear, patience, and a question. This one began with laughter. Years later, travelers exaggerated the story of the orc warrior, the damaged sword, and the human blacksmith. The truth was quieter. A warrior entered a forge believing she was valued only for what she could endure. A blacksmith saw her strength and never mistook it for permission. He asked before touching her sword. He asked before tending her wound. He asked before touching her scar. And on a rainy night beside a dying fire, he asked before giving her the tenderness she had secretly wanted all her life. Vesha had never been kissed. Not because she was unlovable. Not because her tusks, scars, strength, or green skin placed her beyond desire. She had never been kissed because no one before Tomas had been brave enough to offer affection without trying to take something with it. He asked permission. She said yes. And from that single word, they forged a life strong enough to remember every place it had once been broken.